to dread? What have I to fear? Leading the everlasting arm. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leading everlasting. You know that I'm leaning on Jesus.
Church say amen. Can y'all hear me? The Apostle Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 2:15 that we ought to study to show ourselves approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And that's what we're trying to learn to do in this class here. And we talked about in our previous class about the two testaments. And we were basically discussing the difference between the two. Talking about in contrast to the law of Moses and the law of Christ. And we looked at the differences between those two and why we cannot be under both, but only one. In fact, that was one of the things that they talked about in the New Testament when they had the Jerusalem conference. And that's what the Apostle Paul said, that we cannot bind the circumcision onto the Gentiles. And so basically, we're going to look now at the 6 major covenants. Is where we're going to begin our class tonight. We're going to start looking at the covenants. Now, I'm not going to go over all 6 of the covenants. I'm not going to go back that far. But I am going to go back to post-flood, or where Noah after the flood. And the first thing we want to do is look at exactly what a covenant is. And before I get too much into this, what I want to do is I'm going to just tell you the thing that I want you to notice about the first 2 covenants is the first 2 covenants, within the first 2 covenants and within the 3rd covenant as well, there is no mediator. God speaks directly to the person he wants to deal with. So there is no mediator in the first 3 covenants. And there is no token in the first 2 covenants. There is no token in the first 2. But now let's look at what exactly a covenant is. A covenant is a solemn or a sincere agreement entered into by 2 parties in which they are bound together to do things on behalf of each other. In the biblical use of the term, when referring to the God-man relationship, it means that God takes the leadership as his superior and graciously enters into a relationship with man, whereby promises which God makes to man are fulfilled when certain holy conditions are met. Now, that first part of that definition kind of just deals with a covenant in general. Because when we look at God, there is absolutely nothing man can do, so to speak, quote unquote, for God. You with me? Now, notice what I want you to see here. Notice what I'm saying in the definition here, in the biblical use of the term when we're talking about the God-man relationship. God is the superior, right? He takes the initiative, just graciously, and graciously enters into a relationship with man. Well, what are you saying? God, through nothing that man does, shows his unwarranted favor upon man. Okay? And he enters into a relationship with man whereby he makes certain promises to man if man will fulfill certain holy conditions. That's why we know it is God's conditions, right? Now let me try, I'm going to give you this example. I'm going to try to relate back to it in a couple of times. Now, I want you to imagine if you were drowning in an ocean. You could be a billionaire. But if you drowning in the ocean and there's nobody around, right? Then your $1 billion don't do you no good, right? So you even though you may have something, it's of no use to you. The man, or let's say a person came by and he was on a boat and he's got a life raft or a preserver that he can throw to you. Right? Now, this man passes by on his boat. Even though you're in the water and you say, I got $1 billion. Why don't you save me? Save me, please, I got $1 billion. Guy on the boat says, well, I got 4 trillion. You know, I already got more than I need, right? I'm not too much interested in your money. So this guy just got because he decides to, right? Since you can't really offer him nothing, he just decides that he's going to help you. Okay? Now, so because of nothing that you've done, nothing that you can do for him, really, he decides that he's going to just throw you a life preserver, right? Now, he may say, you know what, well, it'd be nice if I had an extra ship hand, right? Somebody to help me around the boat. Not, don't necessarily need him, probably got 5 or 6 already right here, trillionaire. But he says, well, okay, man, I'll just get another hand. I want you to come in and help me, and I'm going to pay you a salary, right? Guy did nothing like that. The guy just decides he should do it. Now, if his life is saved, he really owes the guy his life, right? But like most of us, what I'm trying to get to see, like most of us, once he gets out the water, he don't care nothing about what he owes the guy that saved him, right? That's kind of how we are, right? Anyway, nonetheless, what I want you to see is when in the God-man relationship, we can do nothing for God. But God just decides to graciously show his favor toward us, unwarranted, and he saves us. Now, each covenant, and we're going to see this with Noah, right? If you remember when we covered the first 2 covenants, which was the first one was with Adam, and we remember after we looked at Adam in the Garden of Eden in his fall, we slow walked, and this was what took us so long. We've been doing a lot of slow walking in between the covenants, right? We slow walked and we saw all the way to Genesis 6 where man got so corrupt, right? But we saw God found favor in the eyes of Noah in chapter 6. That's this right here, right? Now, so God tells Noah to build an ark, right? That's the condition, right? Build an ark and you be saved. Now, what I want you to see, if we just look at this part right here, how man can do nothing for God, and God takes the initiative to reach down and graciously or unwarrantedly show his favor toward man. That's the gospel right there. Can you see the gospel right there? That's what he does? Right? Before foundation of the world, he already decided, right? He was going to send his son. That's what Paul talks about in the church at Corinth, right? So we can see the gospel right here, how God just automatically reaches down, right? But I want you to see that's also the initiation of the covenant. You with me? Now, okay, watch this. Each covenant that God enters into or each covenant is for the man or the men to whom it was given and for whom it was intended. In other words, I can't, like the guy who, in our analogy, right, who was saved by the boat, or with the guy on the boat, the trillionaire on the boat. The agreement he makes with the drowning man doesn't go to anybody else but the drowning man, right? That doesn't go to the guy that's already on the shore, right? So I'm just trying you to see. So that's the same way it is with any covenant, the same way it is with God's covenants. It belongs to no one else except when it is extended to them by its offer. Okay? One general condition runs through all covenants that God has made with mankind. Man must believe. He must love and obey God. The Hebrew writer right there in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse number 6. He says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now remember right here we said the promises are fulfilled when the conditions are met. You see, and this is why I say when we quote Hebrews 11:6, as we often do, sometimes we leave off the part that says that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. But that part is very important, see? Because that's why I think we have a lot of us, we say we believe God, but if we understand the covenant, see the conditions, that condition means there's a responsibility or something that you must do. You with me? In order to get the promise. Now, if we believe that God is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him, then we don't have any problem complying with the conditions. Let me tell you why. We go to work every week, right? We believe the employer is going to pay. You go to work a whole week, you ain't got a dime. You didn't get one penny from your employer until payday. Some of us work a whole month. If you get paid once a month, you work a whole month. And you ain't got a dime. But you go and you work every day because you believe your employer is going to pay you. Now that causes Brother Wilson to wonder. See, that's why I say the second part of Hebrews 11:6 is just as important as the first part. See, we like to do, you got to believe that God is. But you also got to believe he's a rewarder. You see, because then you know, like the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:58, your labor is not in vain. But see, if you think that you putting out for nothing, and the employer that we have as far as the God's-man relationship, he knows and sees everything that we're doing. It's not like your employer at your office or your place of work, right? You might can hide a few things from him, but you can't hide anything from God. But then again, on the second hand, we owe him everything. You see, he gives us the air we breathe, the life we live, the food we eat. He causes the plants, the vegetation to grow, all that. So we're getting paid, so to speak, even while we're in rebellion. But yet and still with God, we don't want to, we don't want to put forth no work, right? And see, that's why the Bible says Abraham's faith was counted to him for righteousness. Because he believed God. He left his place with his kindred and went to a far place. Right? And he all by himself. Him and Lot's son, not Lot, him and Lot. Right? And his wife Sarah, he got them. They got in a strange land with strange people. He just going. Why? Because God said go. Some of us can't even come to worship. Do you see the difference? Do you think he faced any dangers? Do you think his path was certain? Yet he went anyway. Now, let's look. There are 4 essential parts of a covenant. The first party, the covenanter or the benefactor, that's God. That's the person who gives the reward or shows the grace, right? That's the God. That's the first party. In all of the God-man covenants, God is always the first party. Second party is the covenantee or the beneficiary. That is us, right? Or man. It's always, man is always the beneficiary in the God-man relationship because man has nothing to give God, but God has everything to give to man. Third part, and this is what I think we oftentimes just overlook, is that the conditions have to be met. But every covenant has conditions. You with me? If there are no conditions, then there's no covenant. So every covenant has conditions. So if you are in a relationship with God, the covenant that you are in with God is the formation of the relationship. You with me? So that means by virtue of you being in this relationship, if you're going to be a beneficiary, right, then there's a condition that you have to meet. That's for those people who say, well, you don't have to do nothing, right? Well, what covenant are you in? There has not been one covenant throughout the scriptures where there was no condition that had to be met. Yeah. So let's see. The promises are blessings to be desired and received after the conditions are met. So there's the conditions, and then there's the reward. See? The reward. That's what those promises are, blessings that are to be desired. That's what you hope for, like Abraham was looking for a land, right? That God had promised him, right? So there was a promise that's going to be desired and received after we meet our conditions. That's also a part of the covenant. And again, it goes back to the point I made earlier. If there's no reward, then why do anything if there's no reward, right? So he's always a reward. God is kind of a God. He rewards us. Now, let's look at the covenant with Noah after the flood. In Genesis 8, Noah built an altar. This is after the flood waters recede, right? And Noah comes off the ark after God, in fact, tells Noah, says, Noah, I want you to get on off this ark, right? And I'm paraphrasing. But God tells Noah, I think it's in the first part of Genesis 8, he says, you get on off this ark. No time for you to get off the ark. He says, I want you and your boys to get off the ark, and I want y'all to start being fruitful. Okay? Anyway, so Noah builds an altar unto the Lord and took every clean beast and of every clean fowl and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his use. That's the natural course of man. Okay? Left unattended in a relationship with God, that is the natural course of man. So God says, I understand this already, right? I understand that man's heart is evil from his youth. But he says, I'm not going to do what I just did and destroy everything for man's sake. He says, neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. Now watch this. Key word. While the earth remaineth. Seed time and harvest and cold and heat and summer and winter and day and night shall not cease. Now, if you believe in God, or the God that is revealed to us in the scriptures, and we've been quoting Isaiah 46, right? How he can declare the end from the beginning, right? So God has said, while the earth remaineth. You with me? Now what I'm really trying to do while I stop on this, because I want us to understand, see, there's consolation that the true believer in God ought to be able to have when he looks into the scriptures. You see, we ought to be able to look into the scriptures and we ought to be able to find consolation when the world is going crazy. When they say science or whatever they say, I'm not going to pick on science, but you can pick on science. And I hope you've seen it through this, even through this pandemic, that if you listen to enough people, you got a different answer or a different solution for everything. One guy got this one. So what you wind up with is utter confusion, right? That's science. Now that's science. And I'm telling you from what I've learned, that's just the nature of science. That's what it is. It's the question why. That's what science does. So that's the nature of science. But anyway, not only science, but what I want you to see, though, is that if we believe in God, then we already know that it says, while the earth remaineth, all this is going to happen. Right? So I don't have to worry about this not happening if I understand who God is. Now, we also know, now this is the key, while the earth remaineth. See, some might say, well, somebody might blow it up but see, no, I know when I look at Revelation that the earth is going to be here when Christ returns. So while the earth remaineth, these things are going to happen. I know that these things are going to happen till Christ returns. You with me? So I don't have to worry about anything else. Now, I'm not saying life will be pleasant. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying, for Brother Wilson, when I look into the scriptures, I can find consolation. I don't have to worry about an asteroid or anything like that. One might hit. I'm not saying one won't hit. Might hit. Might kill a lot of people. But I believe the earth is going to be here till Christ come back. Right? Bible tells us people are going to be going on with life as normal, right? Anyway, I just thought I'd drop that in on you. when we look at the scriptures, because this is who this covenant is for. But first, he made this to Noah. He gets off the ark, right? And God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So when God makes this decree here, he's basically making a basic decree, right? I'm not going to do that no more. He's basically talking to himself for the most part, right? I'm not going to do that no more. Now, he says right here, and God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. He says, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moves upon the earth and upon the fishes and of the sea, and into your hand are they delivered. Now see, if you ever wonder why it is the natural course of an animal to fear you, there it is right there. It's because God decreed it so. You with me? And he says he delivered them in our hand. That's because of our intellect, right? We have superior intellect, so they're delivered in our hand. But the bear doesn't have an innate respect for man, right? That doesn't mean that he won't attack you for the right reason, right? Now, I'm not trying to get you to say that. You just walk around and don't have no common sense, right? That's not what Brother Wilson is telling you. What I'm telling you, the bear has an innate fear or respect for man, right? And unless you do something, and 9 times, if he's just hungry or something like that, right? Or maybe you poking at him, huh? But anyway, but nonetheless, most animals we know, they have an innate fear. And most of the time when they do something to us, it's because they're scared, right? So anyway, nonetheless, I'm just trying to get you to see how God has set things in motion. He says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. And we talked about that our first time through. Y'all remember that? See, before the flood, it was just basically vegetation. But after the flood, now God brings meat in. See, some people say, well, God intended for us. Well, God says right here, every living thing, right, shall be meat for you. So after the flood, and we talked about, of course, I think Josephus said, the vegetation and stuff might have been pretty bad off, Okay, whatever. But the only thing I know for sure, and I'm sure after the flood, that makes good sense, that vegetation is probably in a bad state after the flood water's been on the earth for over 40 days. Well, 40 days, and then God sends a wind and starts drying some stuff up, right? Then Noah, I think, stays on the boat 14 more, on the ark 14 more days. And then he comes off. That's when God tells him to get off. But anyway, nonetheless, the point is vegetation is still probably in a pretty bad shape. Anyway, God tells him that he can eat even the green herb as I given to you all things. So now man can eat from everything, right? Now, the covenant in Genesis 9 and 4-7 says, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And surely your blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Now God here is basically saying that because he created man in his image, whoso sheddeth man's blood, he says, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. So right here, God is putting a value on human life. You see that? Now, I look at that, and then sometimes I think about the level of violence we have in our own communities. And I wonder where we went wrong. I mean, somewhere we have lost this value that God has placed on human life. But what I'm trying to get you to see, though, is what God has said will still ring true. And he says, and you be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly, and in the earth, and multiply therein. And here's where we go right here, Genesis 9 and 18. He says, and God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your seed after you. Now, they're the only ones on the earth, right? In fact, right after this group of scriptures, I think it's verse 11 or verse 12, he says in Genesis, and if you got Genesis, you can go there and look at it. He says that the whole earth was basically repopulated by Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They're the only ones here. So what I'm trying to get you to see is this covenant here is to all of mankind. Because he says, I'm going to do it with you and with the seed after you. Well, their seed after them is the rest of the world. And every living thing, every living creature that is with you, and the fowl of the cattle and of every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. Genesis 9:11 says, I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. Neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the token. So here we come up with the token. And he says, let's see, God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. You see that? See who the covenant is between? Him and the earth. So can God break his covenant? No. He said as long as the earth remaineth, right? Right. But it's also to Noah and them for a perpetual generation. Now, a token is a reminder, right? It's something that you have that reminds you of the covenant that you have established, or your agreement that you have made. That's what the token is. So in every covenant that we see that has a token, I want you to know that's what the token is for. That's important because I want you to see what the token is when we get to the Christian dispensation. Okay? We have a token, in case you did not know. But when we get to the token in the Christian dispensation, I want you to take a good attention. And I'll give you a hint, and some of you probably know this already. It's similar to the covenant or the token of the Mosaic dispensation. The Mosaic dispensation is a shadow, right? But our token is similar to the token that they had under the dispensation of Moses. Now, he said, and it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. The same way he said the first time, now he's saying it now. It's not only is my covenant with the earth, but it's with you, right? And with every living creature, all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. Now, to me, that's good news. You with me? See, we don't have to worry about the world being destroyed by flood. But to me, also, when we see the bow, You see, you know God remembers his covenant. And that lets us know that God is still able. If he can still put his bow in the cloud and remember the covenant that he established with Noah and with all the earth, then we know he's still good. You with me? So we know, that's supposed, to me now, this brother, you see the bow, you say, I know God's, he's good on my promise, right? I know he's good because I see the bow, right? Not only is he letting me know that the world ain't going to be destroyed by water, but we don't worry about that no more. But see, that's because I think of the bow. Let me show you why. Can you imagine, just limit your imagination, after the rain starts coming and it rains and it rains and the whole world is covered with water, if God didn't put his bow in the cloud, the people who had just got off the boat and remembered the flood, and I imagine when them told the story, right? Somebody had to say something. Man, the whole world was sure about flood water, right? I mean, can you imagine that generation or the younger generations or the generations right after the flood? If there was no bow, every time you get to running, wouldn't you? Start looking for high ground. Now, in fact, according to Josephus, now, again, y'all know what I say about Josephus, right? Josephus said they wouldn't come down off that mountain for a while. That's why God had to keep pushing. Y'all get on down, get on down. Then they got down in the bottom in the flats, and then that's when they started making the tower of all that. Anyway, nonetheless, but that's what Josephus, but I can imagine, perhaps it's true, I don't know. I don't know how Josephus knows that. Huh? But it's imaginable. But anyway, nonetheless, but that's what happened. If you didn't know and you started rain for 2 days in a row, maybe you start getting sick, right? When you see the winds of a hurricane, right? You done seen a hurricane come through before and tear some stuff up, right? So you see the winds of a hurricane, you don't act like that you're not in danger, right? Because you don't know what the hurricane gonna do. So that's why I think the rain would be something similar, right? That's just Brother Wilson telling you what I think, right? Yes, ma'am. Amen. Isn't that what the Old Testament teaches? That's what Apostle Paul was saying, right? Romans 15. Anyway, nonetheless, so I just want us to see here, he says, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, and I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. So that is that. Let's see. Now we're going to look at what we just looked at. Now, was that scripture that I was telling you about Noah and them, Shem, Ham, and Japheth and his sons? Was that where I said it was, or was that another place? About where they repopulate the whole world? Was that in Genesis 9 or 8? In one of them, anyway. I thought y'all was supposed to be checking me out. Anyway, nonetheless, okay. So in the covenant with Noah after the flood, the first party was God. And God spake to Noah and his sons with him, saying, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. And the second party is Noah and his seed after him, right? And of course all the earth as well. And God spake unto Noah to his sons with him, saying, and I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of every beast of the earth, with you from all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. The condition of the covenant was that they go and be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth. And you be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. Another condition was not to eat the blood of the flesh, right? Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have given you all things, but the flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. Whosoever sheds man's blood, his blood will be shed. Genesis 9, 5, and 6. And surely your blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast. Will I require it at the hand of man. At the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Now whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man's blood his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God made he man. So really, when we take innocent life, and God says that this is the reason, for in the image of God made he man, what we show is what? When we destroy man or destroy our brother, right, or another man, we're showing really a lack of respect for God. You see that? Because God placed the value on man's life, but he said it's in his image, right? So he's telling us that should be respected. Okay. Promises. God will not curse the ground anymore. The Lord smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, neither will I again smite any more everything living as I have done. So that's what man had to do, not eat blood and not shed blood. And then God's not going to curse the ground. And God will not smite every living thing. And the Lord smelled the sweet savor, like we just read. He's not going to smite every living thing. And the days and the seasons will not cease. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest and cold and heat and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Man will rule over beasts, fowls, and the fish. You see all the promises? Genesis 9 and 2, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing and every herb can be used for food. Every moving thing and every living thing, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb, as I have given you all things. The earth will never be destroyed by a flood again. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. Mediator is none. God spoke directly to Noah. Then the token is God set the bow in the cloud. And of course, we read all of that already, but anyway, I'll read it again. God said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and it will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And it's a good thing, too, that God made this covenant with the earth and with all the living things, because man has been so terrible. Yes, ma'am. means continuing. Generation after generation after generation is perpetual. Thank you. I've enjoyed the class. And next week, I think we'll start on the covenant with Abraham. And in the Hebrew, it's pronounced more like Avraham is the way it's more or less pronounced. The B kind of makes the sound of the letter V, and the A is like a short A. So it's more like Avraham in the Hebrew. That's just to let you know. Anyway, nonetheless, we'll start with the covenant of Abraham on our next class meeting. Thank you. I've enjoyed the class.